G'day, it's Jerry here. Today we're looking at these two fantastic Sony portable CD players from the 90s. These were part of a batch of CD players I bought, and I've got a playlist relating to all the videos I made regarding these. I'm going to be showing you both of these CD players, and everything that I show you today will relate to any type of portable CD player that you might have. The idea is to show you how to get these up and running if they're not fully functional. The CD player on the left, we're going to tear down completely, and I'll show you the internals and the things that could be going wrong on the inside. Why should you care about these? Because these CD players function just as well today as they did the day they were released. Because the CD format was a lossless format, the playback on these devices can actually be better than modern online streaming services. If you like this sort of thing, think about subscribing to my channel. Let's jump straight in. Okay, so if you've never seen one of these before, perhaps you weren't born back in the ancient times when I was born, these came after cassette player Walkmans, and CDs were a game changer for us. And although they were superior basically in every way to tapes, they do have a few quirks. So let me just go over a few things that are common to all of these players. These things only use 2 AA batteries, which seems insane to think that this whole thing is operated off 3 volts, because there's a laser in here, a motor that spins the CD, there's a stepper motor that moves the head up. There's a lot going on in here for 3 volts. Maybe it was a design thing and you had to have the thinnest, smallest possible model to attract people to purchase your gear. They often had buttons which would change the sound, so they would like have a bass boost that would give you more bass. Volume control. This particular one has a remote control. I don't have that, so I can't try that out. And at the back that it has a line out. So here is another model, and of course it's a bit sexier. It's a different size. But basically it has a lot of the same things. This actually has the battery compartment inside. I don't know why. A lot of these have a hold button, and this becomes important if you have one of these and it doesn't appear to work. The hold button, this one's a mechanical button on the bottom, and this one is a mechanical button here. What it does is it actually disables all of the buttons, so they don't do anything, not the physical ones, but the play button and the stop button. And that was so that you could put it in your pocket or something like that and you wouldn't accidentally press buttons. So that's one of the first things, that if not doing anything, you need to make sure it's not on hold, although it should still show you something on the display. So yeah, so it has a hold button. This one's on the back. Now another thing here is, this one says G protection, and this one says electronic shock protection, ESP. It uses way more battery power to have this shock protection mechanism happening. And so in order to conserve battery power, because you've only got 2 AA's, if it was going to be sitting on a bench like this, you would turn off the shock protection and you would get maybe as much as double the battery life out of the units. Now, what is it doing? My understanding is that when it goes into this shock protection mode, it's reading more data at any one point in time. So it's buffering data, so that if it gets a slight movement and it can't read data for a second, it's already got some data in its buffer that it can use. And I believe in order to do that, it might have to spin up the motor on the inside. So actually spin up the speed that the CD rotates at, and that uses a lot of power. Right, so let's move on and actually see one of these things in action. So if you've got one of these, you've never used one before, you should know to expect it to behave like I'm going to show you. So first thing to do is to turn off this hold button if it's on. So you put the CD in and you put that down, and it probably won't do anything because remember, it's trying to save power. And so you put it in, nothing's happening. Normally you just press play and all of a sudden it starts doing something. So I don't know if you can see that, but it comes up with some information. Now I've got this plugged into the audio out here and into a speaker, and I'm probably going to have to mute any of the sound that comes out for copyright infringement, but I just wanted to show you that that's what happens. So you really don't expect to see anything on the display till you actually press something. I'm pressing play, it starts spinning up the CD, and then what it does is for a very brief moment, it shows me the information about the CD. It told me that there were 10 tracks on that. You should expect at least that to happen when you first insert your CD and press play. If that doesn't happen, it means that it's not able to read the CD because there is like a table of contents that it reads first up. And if it can't read that table of contents, then it means that it's having problems reading CDs. So what do you do at that point? Well, the first thing you want to do is make sure that you've got a CD that actually works. The next thing is you can see inside here there is this sort of bubble. That is a lens, and there is a laser that is going to shoot out from that. If that is dirty, then it may be that that's all that's wrong with it. You need to clean that. So to clean that, you just want to use isopropyl alcohol and a cotton swab and just very gently give it a bit of a wipe. Let me just quickly explain how it reads data off these CDs. What's happening is you've got a motor that spins your CD around, you've got a laser attached to a sled which can move the whole laser in and out. This lens here also has a little stepper motor or something on it that allows it to actually move very slightly up and down to allow for perfect focusing of the laser. So they're the three moving parts really that have to be working in order for this to work as well. Okay, so what if you don't have a CD in there and you press play? It won't be able to read the table of contents, so it should just, so it should detect that there's no disc in it. So that's what you should see. Now, if you're not getting any power at all, this isn't coming up with anything on the display, I mean, obviously you want to check the battery compartment and the battery terminals. You'd be surprised at how little oxidization needs to happen on these points in order for it not to be able to get power all the way through. So the first thing I would look at here is if I wasn't getting a display, is I would open this up and I would check all the terminals, and then I would clean them, and I would even maybe use a little bit of sandpaper if they're really bad. If there was some horrible gunky stuff on this indicating that a battery has gone bad in here, obviously you want to clean it. But one of the things that also happens is that tends to cause a problem further on down the circuit board. It seems to, like if it's bad here, it sort of travels down the circuit and back into the internals of the CD player. So you're going to need to pull it apart in that case and look to see whether or not any traces have essentially been eaten out. So make sure your batteries are in the right way, clean up all of these things, and hopefully you will get power. If you don't get power, then we need to look internally. But before you do that, since this has a DC in, you would want to try and use a power supply if you have one that's 4.5 volts. If you applied power here and it all worked, then you would know definitely that there's something going on with the battery portion of it. Okay, so we've got our CD in, we've pressed play, it's read our table of contents, but maybe it doesn't actually play a track. So once again, that could be that the CD is faulty. You can try skipping to the next track, but it may also be that there is something wrong with either the laser assembly or with the carriage which is moving out, or with the part that is focusing the laser. All of those things are going to require opening it up and taking a look inside. So there's not much you can do there. But if you're playing, you should see it telling you what track you're on. What happens if you don't get any sound? There's a couple of things. Now, obviously you've got a volume control here. And that is something that it's a pot, which means that when you twist or when you turn this dial, it increases or decreases the volume. So that could be faulty. It could also be, you would normally have headphones plugged into here. It could also be that the connections in here are oxidized and, you know, you're simply not making a great connection. So what you would do is you would make sure the volume is turned up, obviously, and you would just basically get some headphones. I'll just use this jack, and you get that in there, and you would just keep doing that to try and break the oxidization or rub the oxidization off the internals. Right now, what would be better is if you use some isopropyl alcohol, or better still, contact cleaner. Spray that in there, because contact cleaner is especially designed to clean the contacts. So you spray it into there, and when it's in there, you then go ahead and do this. And the combination of the two is the best method for cleaning internally without having to pull anything apart. Same thing with the volume control. And this is especially true if the volume does work, but when you turn it, it's all scratchy. That usually indicates that there's oxidization, and that can be broken up by spraying some contact cleaner into there and giving it a bit of a manual wiggle. So these are things that you can do without pulling it apart. If neither of those things work, then you want to try and get something out of the line out or the auxiliary port, because it is separate from the headphones. Not completely separate, but there's a separate circuit in there. So the headphones are designed to have a volume control, increase or decrease the volume. The line out is just a steady signal that is designed to be amplified. If you plug your headphones into here, you're probably maybe very faintly going to hear something, maybe. The signal coming out of here is much lower than the signal coming out of here. It's designed to go into an amplifier, which amplifies it. And using the volume control here doesn't normally do anything to the line out. That's why I've got mine plugged in just to a little Bluetooth speaker with an aux in. So I've got the line out into the aux in, and you know, that's how I'm getting sound coming out of that. If nothing's coming out of here, you want to try that. And if you're getting sound coming out of there, then you've just narrowed it down to over here. There's something wrong with the input here. It's either oxidization is stopping good contacts, or perhaps there's a loose solder joint or loose wire or something in there preventing that from happening. The other thing is, of course, that the volume control might be turned all the way down, and even though you're physically turning it, the contacts aren't moving internally inside it, and so it's not doing anything. Essentially, all those things are going to involve pulling it apart, which we will get to. Now let me just show you what happens on this Sony model as opposed to this one, because you know it's slightly different. Once again, we have our hold button, which we need to make sure is off. Now this has this little sort of joysticky device which allows you to push to the right or push to the left, and it springs back to the center. But also if you push down on it, it's a clicky button, right? And that's how you start play on this and skip forward and skip back in the tracks. So let's grab the disc out of here and see what happens. And this is the weird thing, right? So now it looks like it's dead. It's turned off, right? What it's really waiting for is to press play before it wakes up again. And I think this has got to do with the conserving of power. But if you just put a disc in and you just looked at that, you go, well, this thing doesn't work. And you can press buttons and you can do anything that you want. Volume up, volume down, it's not doing a damn thing. You have to press the button in to activate play before it does anything. And then it goes to the table of contents and then starts playing the first track. So yeah, really pays to read the manual on these things because some of them had some weird ways of working. Okay. So there we go. That's the basic operation of these portable CD players. It's time to pull this one apart and have a look on the inside and see what's going on there. Let's take this apart. So looks like the screws here have got a nice little arrow next to them to indicate they should be taken out. Okay, see if that does it. So we just need to be careful that nothing comes flying out or any ribbon cables that might be attached get pulled out. Okay, so it was clip. Just gave that a gentle pull. I'll try the other end now. So I'm trying to be careful because if I rip it apart and there's a ribbon cable in there, I could break it. This end feels far more secure. Let me find a spudger. Okay, let's give this another go. Okay, there's a clip there. Yes, okay. So, just gently have a look inside. Oh, nice. So no ribbon cable connecting it, which is good. I guess the display is connected directly to the board, so that would make sense. Nice. Okay, so all of these buttons here are a bit complicated, aren't they? So the important thing is, are they going to fall out? Nope. One tip I would give you is when you're doing stuff like this is take some photos on your camera or do what I'm doing and videotape it. That will help you out a lot. If something falls out, you can go back to the picture and have a look. Okay, so there it is. Okay, so we'll zoom in a bit in the microscope, but let me just give you an overall view. So here's our unit with the laser and the motor and everything together. It looks like it's just connected via a ribbon cable over here and a couple of power cables. So not much going on there. The LCD screen actually looks a little weird. See those around the edges there? Like it's degrading a little bit, but it still works. And yeah, everything else just seems to be fairly standard. You can see that this is on little rubber grommets that help dampen the motion, so it still allows it to move. And it looks like our battery terminals are soldered directly onto the PCB. And so if this wasn't working, then I'd be looking at very closely at what's going on inside, and I'd be looking for any components that might be blown up. I'd also consider removing the board. So I might get to that in a second. But, you know, some of the points of failure, obviously, these jacks, they could have loose solder joints on them because they've been physically had things plugged into them, so they get a lot of strain. So I'd be looking at the battery terminals to make sure they're soldered on correctly, and also to look to see whether any of the traces are broken that may have corroded away from getting rot come from batteries in here, coming up and then corroding away the traces here. I mean, definitely if everything else was working, but you know, the sound wasn't coming out of the jack, well, we have to come over here and have a look at the audio jack. But really we'd need to look at the other side of it where it's soldered on. I'm guessing that's through hole. It's hard to see from here. But yeah, it's probably soldered through to the other side of the board, and it could have loose solder joints on there. So anyway, why don't we remove the PCB so we can see both sides of the board, and you can see how easy that's going to be for you to do if that's what you want. Okay, so I don't see any screws here. There might be some under here, but I think I'll just try prying it out first, see if we can't get it to come out. Sometimes they can just be held in by the battery terminals. Okay, so it feels like the PCB wants just to lift up, but this doesn't. The laser assembly, because it's being held in by these rubber grommets here. So it probably would make sense to remove that. Although I could probably pull it out, but then it would be dangling, you know, from these wires if I did that. And if you're going to pull one of these apart, you probably want to see me disassemble it so that you don't have to break your own, which I'm happy to do. I don't mind doing that. So pulling these power leads out, that can be a source of frustration. Sometimes they're in really stiffly, and they can cause a problem. The other thing is the ribbon cable here. I think people are way too hard on ribbon cables. You know, this has been around for 30 years. Maybe this is 90s. And they don't last forever, and they only have a certain lifetime of being disconnected and reconnected, and it's not a lot, like maybe 6 or 7 times. So it's not something that you really want to go pulling out and pushing back in very often. I mean, the thing is, we need to figure out what type of ribbon cable connection it is. Some of them flip up, some of them have little latches on them. Okay, so this is the clip here that we're trying to get out. So it doesn't look as though it flips up. If I have a look, it definitely doesn't do anything from the back. It almost looks as though it just pushes on. And there are these 2 notches here, which I feel as though would be used for something to just get in there and push them like that. Haha. So that released it, and is it then going to fold up? It just clips up. So it does push down and then clip in. Okay, so we've got that done. So let's move on over to these. So plugs, and I'm just going to try very gently to get one of them out. It'll ruin your day if you break these, so take it slow, figure out the best way. Okay, so I got my needle points in there and got under each end and leave it up. So let's try that again over here. So I'll just give it a bit of a twist on either side. Yep. Perfect. So I can't really do it from this end because there's a capacitor in the way. Whew. Okay. So we've got the ribbon cable over here, which I think will just pull straight out now. Okay, good. So I'm guessing this will just pull out now. So it's being held in by these rubber grommets. It's just friction force, I think. So I just pulled and the whole grommet came out. Wonderful. Okay. So there's the unit taken out. The rubber grommets just pulled straight out of the unit. So there's little pegs in there. See here and here and here. So the rubber grommets just pull straight out. And then we've got our unit here all in one. So we've got the motor that spins the CD here, and we've got the ribbon cable connecting it to the stepper motor, which is going to slide the carriage out. And also there's some mechanism, I don't know whether it's a motor or it's a electromagnetic mechanism or something like that, that is actually allowing, I don't want to touch it, but it allows this thing to move slightly up and down. See, it's sort of moving there, so it can actually adjust the focus. So all that's handled by a single unit, and obviously if anything goes wrong here, we're probably not going to be able to read the table of contents, or it's going to have some problems skipping, and sort of the obvious things would be mechanical. The motor isn't able to move the carriage out, and you can see there's probably grease involved here. There's some sort of grease in there to lubricate it, and that could be, I don't know if you can see that, that could be yeah, it is still soft, but that could definitely dry up, and that could be all that's causing the problem, really. A little bit of re-lubrication would be something I'd be trying on this unit if the carriage wasn't moving properly. And I guess you could lubricate the motor if it wasn't able to spin fast enough. But I think we'll just leave this alone for the moment. But this is definitely something you can look into. Just a word of warning I've found in the past, if you've got anything that is on a screw like this, don't try and move it manually. If you want to see whether or not it can move turn the screw, right, and have it move out. Do not try and force it. That will end up breaking something. You definitely don't want to do that. All right. But the lubrication appears to be intact. It all looks good. Well, mine works, right? But if yours isn't working, definitely want to take this out. And look, who knows? Being Sony, you can probably buy these parts still, or maybe they're in stock somewhere in China, pulled out of old units. Who knows? But yeah, if you had to replace this, you could just replace the whole bit. No problems. Okay, so the whole point about that was, can we pull out this entire PCB so we can get to the other side? Is there anything holding it in? And no, there's nothing. And there's not a great deal going on in here. Is anything going to fall out? No. It's interesting. That looks to be maybe some RF shielding in the bottom there. What was under that? So that's where the power comes in. The power circuitry. Why would there be RF shielding underneath this particular bit? I don't know. If you know, let me know in the comments. But that does look to be some sort of copper tape. All right, let us turn this over and see what we got. As you can see, the jacks are soldered through hole. So from the other side through to here, all of these things are soldered. And this is a great place to get cold solder joints. I'll zoom down. Yeah, so as I was saying, being through hole, these are great spots for cold solder joints because they're under a lot of pressure because things have been plugged in and out. And over time, these solder joints essentially can crack. And, mine's working, so that hasn't happened. But if it wasn't, then I'd be coming in here and having a good close look. And even just resoldering these joints just cause, even if they look okay, giving them a resolder can help. And of course, if you've got power problems, the battery terminals are the same deal. And where's our, so here's our pot here for the volume control. Same here. And this would be a good opportunity to just check to see whether that pot is working. And perhaps squirt some contact cleaner into the mechanism. Yeah. So that's what it looks like on the inside. So there's really not much more I can say apart from, if you pull one of these apart, give it a good close inspection, looking for any components that are blown up. Okay, so that you can see scorch marks on them or anything like that, anything that looks physically damaged. Look for cold solder joints. Look at each of the capacitors here, the electrolytic capacitors, because these often go, like you would look to see whether or not they're bulging, whether or not they've leaked out. It might be worth just replacing them anyway, because even if they look good, because they have chemicals in them, the electrolytic capacitors, and over time those chemicals can evaporate and they just stop functioning properly. So they don't necessarily have to look bad. They can be bad, whereas most of the other components, they tend to show problems. So there you go. It wasn't terribly difficult to disassemble. You want to be careful with the ribbon cable and with these power connectors here, but apart from that, there wasn't really anything to worry about. So if yours isn't working, you should definitely give it a go, in my opinion, because it's already broken. What have you got to lose? All right, so let me put all this back together. That will be the proof that I haven't broken anything. If I can get it back together and it still works. So that just sits inside. What's next? I guess this should go in. So it's this ribbon cable that we want to be careful of. So I think I might put that in first. So I'll get that all the way in. Okay. That looks good. So we'll get those rubber grommets over their standoffs. And I love the fact that these are color coded. That all looks pretty good. Beautiful. Screws. Okay, so I'll just quickly test all the buttons seem to be connected. And yeah, this internal bit is held in place quite nicely. Okay, so what do you think my chances are of it working? I'm going to plug it into my little amp. Press play. Spinning. Are we getting table of contents? Yes. So I'm going to have to talk over this. We'll do a fast forward. Yeah. It all seems to be working fine. Fantastic. Well, we've got it back together and everything's fine. As you can see, it wasn't terribly difficult to pull one of these apart and put it back together. So I hope that encourages you to do the same if you have one of these portable CD players that you're interested in repairing or just pulling apart. Obviously, if the electronic components inside are broken and they need to be replaced, that's a completely different thing. There's a lot of things though that can be going wrong with this that are relatively simple to fix. The battery compartment being one of them, perhaps lubrication on the optical unit, stuff like that. I mean, you won't know until you pull it apart and have a look inside. And you know what I always say, if it's already broken, what have you got to lose? Anyway, I guess we'll leave the video there. I hope you enjoyed that. If you like it, please think about subscribing to my channel, giving me a thumbs up, and I'll catch you on the next video. Ciao.